Nathan, thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. Tell me about your business. Tell me where you guys are located. I'm not sure it matters for what you do, but tell me where you guys are located anyway. Uh, and then what's your website address, social media, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I started a company called Photographers Edit about 12 years ago. We offer post-production for professional photographers, particularly for wedding and portrait photographers or event and portrait photographers. And we specialize in matching the photographer's processing style, which is really important to a lot of photographers. They want to be unique. They want to stand out.
Yep.
And our company is based, our headquartered just outside of Cleveland, Ohio, actually. But as you pointed out, we are quite remote. We have a team of remote really a remote team, very simply put. And I'm actually based in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area.
Nice, nice. So I know you said you were a photographer earlier when we were talking. Is that why you got into this photo editing thing? Tell me a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so I started shooting weddings in about 2001 and got to a place where I was shooting as many as 30 or 40 weddings a year. And the post-production was a nightmare. I started on film. And of course, it was easy enough. You could just go drop the film off at the lab and get the prints back. And it was simple. It was wonderful. But when we started shooting digitally, now we had a bunch of post-production work to do. And at the time, this was about 2007 or so, there weren't very many solutions for post-production or outsourcing post-production in the photography industry. And the ones that existed were complicated and they were expensive.
Yeah.
And so I saw a business opportunity just as an entrepreneur to start something to fill a gap in the market, to serve many more photographers by bringing the price point down and also by simplifying the process. And so Photographers Edit was born at that point, both for the sake of a business opportunity, but also because I was desperate to get rid of this post-production work that was taking up my life. So.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. Like, it's interesting. Like you just said, we went from film, right? And you just drop it off and get the prints back to all this post-production work we have to do with digital. So I don't know, is digital really buying as much nowadays, right? When you think about all the extra work you got to do.
Well, I think the thing that we all love at the end of the day, or many of us anyway, and I'm certainly guilty of it in various areas of my life, is that we like control. We like to control things. And I think digital photography gave photographers a sense of control. The unfortunate part came with the assumption or even projection onto clients or potential clients that unless we touch those images ourselves, the client's not going to be happy. Yeah. And this is funny for multiple reasons, but I actually think about it just from a personal standpoint. I have 2 kids, and on my refrigerator at home, I have a bunch of snapshots. They're taken with this little, or actually printed out with this little Instax printer, images that were photographed with a phone. And so we're talking about low quality, non-color corrected, framed poorly, probably a little bit blurry at times, imperfect expressions. And I absolutely love, exactly, yes, absolutely. I love that collection. That is ultimately my favorite collection of photographs that I get to view on a regular basis. And it's far from perfect. So we have to keep in mind, and you actually made a really interesting point earlier, the reality is that most of our potential clients, they're used to the images that can be photographed on a phone, and they're actually quite happy with them. So if that's the standard that they're okay with, we're shooting with multi-$1,000 cameras, and we're taking some time to post-produce those images, they're going to be quite happy. Where the more important part of the conversation lies is actually in the client experience. And now that photography is a commodity of sorts that can be easily captured by any and everyone with this thing that's in our pocket, it no longer matters so much that we are micro adjusting that magenta out of an image. What really matters now is creating a distinct experience that enables us to stand out beyond the so-called competition in our market.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point because unfortunately, photography has become commoditized in a way, and it's just the unfortunate nature of how technology evolves and what happens. But I've interviewed many photographers, and we always go back to like, how much time do they spend editing? And it's always 20, 40, 60 hours editing photos. It's like, man, what else can you do, right? Like you're literally taking one weekend of work and then spending the rest of the next week or 2 editing the photos. So tell me a little bit about like how the technology that you do can take care of that for them. Are you guys using technology, or you have editors actually doing the work for them, kind of alleviate some of the pain?
Well, it's really two-part process. So first, it's collection, really an understanding on our part of what the photographer's style is, their editing style is. And so we've created a system where in which they're able to share their editing style in their account with our editing team, so that our editing team isn't just blindly editing their images and guessing and hoping that this is going to turn out great. We actually have a really great point of reference if the photographer takes the time to fill out that information, both a visual reference as well as a text-based reference, instructions, text-based instructions. And so that's the basis of our whole system. And the reality, of course, is that many, if not most photographers are not used to the idea of being a manager, and as a result, then delegating. They're sole proprietors, right? They're used to thinking for themselves and only communicating with themselves. So this process, if they begin to delegate their editing work, is a bit of a foreign process in that they have to learn how to communicate what it is that they want. In fact, in order to communicate what it is that they want, they have to understand clearly what it is they want to begin with. Then they have to learn how to communicate it. We try to make it as easy as possible for them to share those preferences, to communicate with us. And then there is also the other component, or the third component, which is the follow-up process. So after they get the images back, we have a really detailed feedback system that enables the photographer, if they get an order back and they're like, you know what, this looks great, but maybe the contrast was a little bit off in this section of the portraits. Can you go back and fix that for us? Then they can give us that feedback. It just takes them a couple of minutes. They don't have to email back and forth with support. They just fill out that form, give us a couple of examples. We can get that updated for them, send them the updated Lightroom catalog, and it doesn't cost them anything extra. And the thing that I liken that to is I worked in retail for a number of years when I was much younger. At no point in time did I ever work for a company that hired me and said, okay, go do the job, without training, number one, and without ongoing training, ongoing communication, right? So photographers have to understand that there is massive benefit, time and financial benefit by outsourcing their editing, but they have to be willing to commit to the process of communication, not just upfront, but ongoing communication, and the results can be amazing. I mean, just hundreds of hours saved ultimately in a year.
Well, and it gets easier as you go along, right? Because as you guys, as your team becomes more familiar with that photographer, their style, what they like, then the communication part becomes less hands-on, right? Like they don't need to help. They don't need to sit and provide too much feedback at that point, because you guys got a good idea of what exactly that photographer likes, right? I mean, that's what I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they've taken the time to communicate. We've taken the time to develop a relationship with them, to get additional feedback in some cases. So yeah, there's an opportunity. I mean, it sounds cliche these days because fortunately in our industry, relationships have taken much more of a front row in the day-to-day interaction between business and client. But it really is a relationship, a working relationship, if the photographer allows that to happen, and we welcome it. And so we've been in this now for 12 years. Outside of COVID, we normally process millions of images a year, and we've had the opportunity to work with photographers in the US and Canada and Australia and Europe. And so it's been a really incredible opportunity.
So tell me what the process is. I'm a photographer. I come to you. What do I have to go through? And I know you described like some of the editing process, but what does the initial process look like for a photographer?
Very simply, let's say they shoot a wedding, for example. They come back with those images. I would say during our regular season, busy season, about 70% of our clients cull their own images. So they take out the bad stuff. So they'll go in and pick the images that they actually want to send to us or have us process. And then they send those images to us via Lightroom catalog and what are called smart previews. They're like mini raw files. And our team gets that information or takes that catalog, and that combined with the information that they share in the editing style or the editing preferences that I mentioned earlier, they process those images. When that order is completed, 5 business day average turnaround time for a wedding, then they send that catalog back to the client. They're able to download it, connect it to the original files, see all the work that our team has done. It's actually a really cool process when the catalog connects to the files, and then just slowly you see all this work begin to build and the thumbnails and the images. But they're able to export the images to JPEG from there, and it's done. Yeah.
For you, when you were a photographer and you had to make that transition to like holding on to your photography work and doing all the editing, what was the thing that kind of got you across there? Because I know a lot of photographers like to hold on to what they do. And I personally feel like that they should be using technology or outsourcing some pieces of the work that, to streamline their own work, right? Reduce the time commitment that they have to put into this thing, be able to reduce their cost, right? Because that's part of it too. Like, time is money. And as a photographer, if you're spending 60 hours per event, that's a lot of time investment that you have to put in there. When you can turn it around and give some of that to someone else, how much time do you get back? How much money do you save, right? So what was the thing that turned I know you kind of got into this as an opportunity, you saw it as an opportunity, but what was the thing that kind of turned you around?
Well, I would say I realize, as not only a photographer, but certainly now as an editing company owner as well, that clients don't actually put the importance on those details that we would have assumed. And so if I have to take a step back, because I like to look at things from kind of a philosophical level, right?
Okay.
It'd be easy for me to say, hey, you need to outsource your editing and place an order. But I think we need to take a step back. So there are two big ideas here. One is the idea of a belief or series of beliefs. Everything that I do in life, personally and professionally, is rooted in a belief. And that belief can help me, or it can potentially harm me. And so in the case of, I assume or ultimately believe as a photographer that my client is going to be unhappy with the finished work if I delegate it to some other editing company, or maybe even an in-house editor for that matter. They need to ask the question, the photographer needs to ask the question, what is that belief rooted in? Is that something that I'm assuming, or have I gotten overwhelming feedback from clients that they're unhappy with the images that I had processed elsewhere?
Yeah.
So it starts with just understanding the belief that's driving that assumption or the projection, which has led to this place where a photographer, as you pointed out, is spending, I would say an average 16 to maybe 20 hours per wedding. And, multiply that times 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 a year. It's just nightmarish. And they put themselves in a hole. They're stuck. They're missing out on time with friends, with family, and they're ultimately missing out on time as well to do things that will actually build their business.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the second big idea. We start with beliefs, the belief system that's driving why we're doing what we're doing. But almost as important really is something that I refer to as a big picture view. And there was a book called Time Management from the Inside Out, written by a lady named Julie Morgenstern. And she talked about this idea of a big picture view and how it enables the most successful people to rise above the chaos and maintain perspective. And I know that a lot of photographers, myself included at times, exist in this kind of haphazard reactive mode, right? Yeah. So the question is, how can we rise above that, constantly reacting to everything, all the editing we have to do, the emails we have to manage, the additional admin work, the album design, the accounting, whatever it might be. How can we rise above that, maintain perspective, and actually build a business that brings us not only financial freedom, but time as well? And so you have to take a step back and develop this so-called big picture view. It starts with understanding our values, the things that are most important to us, our understanding our strengths, what we're best at, looking at the market and seeing opportunity, and then ultimately creating a business model that are based around these ideas. And that will enable us, once we set certain financial and time goals, to create a business that will simultaneously give us that financial freedom that we need and want, but also give us the time component as well. And so that, of course, brings us back to the editing piece. If I am trying to set a certain financial goal, a certain time goal, what do I need to do in order to get to that place? Well, one of the most time-consuming elements of a photography business is my editing work. If I have now realized that my belief was faulty about clients being unhappy about someone else processing those images, let's keep in mind that some of the most famous photographers in the world had developers doing the work for them.
Oh, yeah.
So this is not a new concept, right? But if once I get past that and I realize there's opportunity for me to have freedom, flexibility to do things that actually build my business, I'm able to delegate that out. I'm able to have more time now to spend developing my business and spend with the important people in my life.
Yeah. Is there a threshold financially for them where they say, it doesn't make sense for me to do it? Like, so I guess you got a couple of choices. You either have to edit the photos yourself because you're a one-man show, one-person show, or you have in-house people helping you edit your photos, or you can outsource it and have editing, someone edit the photos. Having someone on staff is probably a lot more expensive because now you have overhead that you have to take care of inside. Time is really the thing for you. Generally, if you're the only person doing it, you got to do everything in small. But if you're the only one in your company, you're usually doing everything, right? Is there a threshold financially where it makes more sense to do that, versus like, I don't know. There seems to be this threshold when you hire someone, you go, okay, I have a certain amount of time. I'm doing all this stuff in my business. I have all these things I have to do. Some things I'm good at, some things I suck at, some things I'm really good at. Right. So I'm not so good at this over here. So I think if I just gave this to somebody to do, hire someone to help me with this piece of it within my budget, right, then great. I think I could get some more time back to focus on the things I'm really good at. So there's this threshold, I believe, in business where you start to do more of that, and then you can actually spend more time as an individual managing and growing your business for real, right? What is the threshold, would you say, for something like that?
Well, first of all, to your point about hiring somebody in-house, it could be an interesting opportunity. The caveat there is certainly the cost, as you pointed out. The other piece of it is scalability, right? What if this person leaves and now I'm stuck trying to find someone else that I have to train all over again?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're working with an edit, yeah, exactly. I mean, a number of things can come up. Yeah. Working with an editing company like ours, who has a team of editors that can act as a backup in the case that somebody is out or is sick or whatever happens. That means that it is a scalable solution that enables you to continue to function throughout the business year. So that's one side of the conversation. But as far as the threshold is concerned, we're in a certain situation right now managing COVID and all its effects on business that is quite unusual. And I understand in situations like this that photographers are doing everything they can in many cases to hold on to as much cash as possible. Yeah. And in addition to that, one of the normal recommendations that I would make, and we'll get to this threshold idea in a second, but within that conversation is the recommendation that with the newfound free time, when they do outsource their editing, that they focus on doing things that will actually build their business. Wedding photographers in particular right now are in a spot where they can't actually use extra time to go build their business because there isn't business to be had. Yeah. So these are unusual circumstances. I understand the concept of holding on to cash now. In normal, or even somewhat normal business circumstances, yeah, if there is opportunity for you to delegate that work out to somebody else, and editing work, being an email, answering phone calls, doing accounting work, album design, some of these kind of busy work tasks that the business has to have accomplished in order to exist, but doesn't actually require your involvement. Those things can be delegated. Editing falls under that, so that you can focus as a business owner on what I would call proactive tasks, those things that actually move your business forward. Mm-hmm. And so in that situation, if a photographer comes to me and they're even part-time and they say, you know what, I'm not so sure that I can outsource my editing right now. I need to just, focus on keeping as much cash as possible. And once I get busier, I'll begin outsourcing. Yeah. And my encouragement to them would be to begin outsourcing now for two reasons. One, to learn how to be a manager who is thinking long-term, big picture, building a scalable company that doesn't burn you out in the process. Yeah. Two, outsource your editing so that it actually frees you up to have more time to do the thing that brought the most business to me, and that is to focus on developing relationships. So if you're a wedding photographer, for example, let's just say on a super conservative level, normally takes you 8 hours to process a wedding. If you hand that to a different company like Photographers Edit to do the editing for you, with that 8 hours, I could spend the first couple hours doing maybe taking a local coordinator to coffee. And we sit down, we have coffee, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I'd love the opportunity to work with you, but I want to get to know you for a little bit. Let's do coffee, let's do lunch, let's do dinner. Sit down, begin to develop a relationship. At the end of that, you say, you know what, this is really fun. I really want the opportunity to work with you, but I want to also make sure I'm giving value to you. Can I photograph your family? Can I do new headshots for your website? So that person says, yes, absolutely. And so you do that another couple hours. So you're 4 hours in to the beginnings of a relationship, which can literally bring you thousands of dollars. We worked with a coordinator in the Chattanooga area who brought us untold thousands of dollars worth of business, to the extent that she would literally bring clients to our office, sit down and sell them for me. I could just sit back and not even talk. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
But those relationships don't happen when we're sitting behind the computer, adjusting the magenta and the cyan a little bit here and playing with that preset. That stuff's fun. Genuinely, I enjoy it to a point, but it's not helping me build my business. It's not helping me focus on important relationships in my life. So it can be delegated out so that I can focus on those things. And so there's, in my mind, there's the only threshold, if you will, is, we're in dire circumstances where we have to have cash, and no amount of outsourcing my editing is going to bring me any more cash right this second. I have to keep it. Okay, fine. That makes sense. Outside of that, learn, whether you got a little bit of business or a lot of business, learn to build a scalable business by delegating that work out and then focus on the stuff that will drive growth.
Yeah, there's a lot of weekend warriors, so to speak, I would say, that do photo shooting, and then they do video. I've interviewed a couple videographers that actually do it kind of like, on the weekend and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the videographer, poor guy, he spent all his time editing videos. He was so far, it's like,
yep.
I'm thinking to myself, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? A better way to spend your time than doing that. What's the financial commitment for someone that's even like part-time or, getting into this?
24 cents an image. And that
Wow.
One of the cool things that I'm really stoked about with our business model is that in contrast to other companies out there, we don't require a contract, a commitment, and there is no monthly fee that you're stuck to. And there were other companies that did that for the sake of kind of bringing costs down and hopefully getting large numbers of photographers on board. And I think it worked for a little bit. And then photographers started to realize, oh, shoot, I'm stuck in a contract. I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
And then had a hard time getting out. So we've kept it really simple. I talked about simplicity earlier. Our brand was initially built on this notion of simplicity. We realized photographers did want more control, more customization. So we went ahead and gave them that. But what we've tried to do is keep that price point simple and flexible. They're not stuck to contract, so they can send us 1 image or 10,000 images, whatever works best for them.
Wow.
And so for
that's
somebody
really reasonable. Well, I don't understand
100%.
why anybody wouldn't do that.
And it's, when you think about like 80 images for a portrait session, $16, $17, $18, for a wedding, maybe you're talking 600 to 800 images. I know some photographers deliver 1,000, 1,200, 1,500, and I think it's honestly overkill. Most of our clients don't have the time to look through 1,500 images.
Wow.
So give them the best of the best. That'll help you save time and money. So, let's just call it 800 images, for example. You're talking $180 or something like that at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. Let me ask you this. What is the time commitment for someone to get up to speed with the editing process? Let's say I'm new with you guys, and we're trying to understand what I like and all that. So how long does it take for someone to kind of get up to speed to what you guys are about, what you guys do, and then be able to relate back to them?
Yeah. So filling out your editing style, your editing preferences in your account, that might take 20 minutes.
Okay.
And all it involves is just sharing some examples, before and afters, from an event, a portrait session, various lighting scenarios. So for example, a photographer might have processed their most recent event or portrait session. They would go to that and they would pull the original, because of course in Lightroom you can go back through the history to the untouched image. So they would screenshot that untouched image. They'd go to the finished process image, screenshot that. That's a before and that's an after. And they can upload up to 16 of those so that our team can have a visual reference of how they would process those images. They upload their Lightroom presets. They upload additional or communicate via text additional instructions with regards to color correction, cropping, and black and white.
Yeah.
And that's it. So we're talking, if they just jump right in and do it, it may be about 20 minutes or so. They're done with that part. And then once they place the first order, they can actually create order templates too, because we do give them lots of options in the ordering process as well. So in order to save time in future orders, you can create an order template. You can save those settings. The next time you go to place an order, it can take, 90 seconds to place an order if you want to.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Why wouldn't you do that? I'm not even a photographer and I'm ready to do it. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the business side of things. So for you as a business owner, I know you've been doing this for a while, but what would you say probably is over the past couple of years has worked well for you in general? I can already in my head see that the simplicity part is the number one thing that's worked well for you. But what else has worked well for you guys?
The other thing in my mind, I just think the word value. How can I add value?
Yeah.
And it comes from a real genuine place. I want to make an impact on the lives of the photographers that I've had the opportunity to work with and will have the opportunity to work with. And this comes from a very personal place. One, I grew up in a household where we'll just say the parents were quite busy. And I know what it's like to be on the other side of wanting more time with my parents. And I know the significance of personal relationships, the importance of personal relationships. So if I can do something to help photographers have more time with their kids, have more time with their significant other, with other friends and family, I'm all about that. So there is a driving desire for me to add value to the lives of these photographers by ultimately giving them time back. So yes, simplicity is important for the sake of user experience, but a focus on adding value, first of all, through the service that we're providing. And then about maybe 4 years ago now, started a podcast, and I've recorded about 435 episodes or so now.
Nice.
And a ton of content, but it doesn't cost photographers anything. We have photographers on from a wide variety of experience levels, genres, and backgrounds. And we talk about photography and business and time management as well. And we're able to add value to photographers' lives that way as well. So it's a way for us, certainly, I mean, to soft sell for Photographers Edit. We mentioned Photographers Edit here and there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the focus is on adding value and creating community, having important conversation. And the feedback that we've gotten from photographers about the difference that's made in their lives and their business has been so encouraging, so fulfilling. You know, I can run a business and see good numbers. That's cool. But if I'm not making a difference in people's lives, then I feel like I'm missing out.
What are we doing then? Yeah, that's exactly it, right? I mean, that's why I do the wedding report, is because I want to add value to people's lives. I want to make sure they understand, look, the biggest thing I want them to understand is that even though this is what you charge for what you do, and the circle you run in is what they charge for what they do, that is not the entire market. There is so much more out there that's beyond what what you sell your stuff for. So you need to understand what that is, because, for example, photography has become a commodity item, unfortunately. And guess what? There are weekend warriors doing it. There are the guy on Craigslist, my uncle Joe's doing it. My best friend's a photographer and said, hey, I'll shoot whatever you want for $500, just let me know, or I'll do it for free. I mean, all of these options. This little device right here is an excellent camera. I mean, so you need to understand the market. And if I can help them, just understand, look, this is the size of the market. This is the demand for your product. This is where people are spending their money. Look at what those opportunities are. Look at the demographics of the market. I mean, understanding your market is essential for you to survive as a business. You can't
100%.
offer $5,000 service in a market where there's just this much of it and everybody wants it. Everybody wants to sell to it's funny, this business, right? Everybody wants to sell to the luxury market side of the wedding business. And they don't, most of them don't realize there's a certain level of service that costs you a hell of a lot of money that you have to meet to play in that space. But only a small percentage of the market is in there. The real meat of the market is out in the middle. And if you just look at what that potential is, and then take options like what you offer, for example, right? So if I go shoot, look at my time, how much time does it really take me to go shoot an event, right? And if I say, look, I'm going to be there for 5 or 6 hours, figure out what that's going to cost you, figure out what that looks like. And then if you're going to outsource, and then take all your editing and outsource it to someone like you, and then now you can go shoot 3 or 4 of those and make way more profit than you would having to shoot one big one at whatever price, right? You got to look at the end dollar, the end price, as far as the profit goes for your business, and understanding that. I went on a rampage.
No, hey, I am 100% there. In fact, Shane, I cannot tell you at this point, because I've been fortunate enough to have to be able to buy your wedding report for years now. I have referenced that report countless times in individual conversations on the podcast for multiple reasons. One, first of all, and I think the significance anyway of it is the very thing that you were pointing out, which is data. And to kind of break the fourth wall, I think you mentioned earlier you were going to ask me one of the things that, if I would say to myself 3 to 5 years ago, what would I tell myself? And that thing would be, and not just 3 to 5 years ago, but 10, 12, 15, 20 years ago as well. My biggest shortcoming as a business owner in the past has been not using data. I'm a very emotional individual. I was making way too many decisions based on how I felt that moment. And our photography industry is rife with that behavior. And I get it. Again, I can empathize with it, right? So I'm not judging, but unfortunately it hurts a lot of photographers. So whether that's paying attention to the so-called data, the financial data in their business, and actually making intelligent decisions based on that, but also doing the very thing that you're talking about, which is to actually get the kind of data that you published in the wedding report to develop awareness about the marketplace and make intelligent decisions about that. It's so vital. And to the very thing that you were saying, I can't tell you again how many times I've had a conversation with an individual photographer, a group of photographers, or maybe on the podcast, about how all these photographers are just cramming into that mid to upper end segment of the market. And I understand it. I did it myself. I get it. I want to shoot less weddings and make more money. But meanwhile, between 70 and 80% of weddings are shot for $2,000 and below. Again, a la your report. And so there's this massive segment of the market that's not served. Massive opportunity. It's going to take discipline and creating the system necessary to handle the volume. And I think that's where a lot of photographers are going to be like, sorry, not doing it. And I get it. But nonetheless, there's opportunity there, but they would not know that unless they actually looked at the data. So it's so important that as business owners, yes, as photographers who in many cases, we label ourselves as artists, but at the end of the day, we're business owners. We have to leverage data. And this is certainly a great source of data.
Yeah, that's it right there. I mean, how do you have to look at the internal costs and structures and how you do stuff to realize what it is you're putting into it and what else you can get. I mean, I guarantee you that if you actually did, I know I get it. Everybody in this business is creative. And, I mean, I have some creative, I like to play music. I love music.
I saw that. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I also have a business and I also have to think analytically about things. And it's hard sometimes to do it. I know it is. But as a business, you really need to understand how much you're making off of the gigs that you're doing, right? If you're spending 20 or 30 hours on a gig, you're not making it that much money off of it, right? If you have, to put all that time into it, what can you do to reduce that, right? It's a discipline thing, like you said, right? Look at what you're doing. Look at how much time you're spending on things and try to figure out ways to spend less on it so you can spend more time doing other things, whether it's with your family, whether it's doing more gigs or whatever. I think you'll end up finding that you'll make more profit at the end of the day if you find out a way to streamline the mid section of the market, right? And I hate to always use this. I use this all the time, but look at Walmart. I mean, not everybody likes Walmart, and I get it, but these guys, I mean, what do? They sell things for the lowest price possible, but they make billions of dollars in profit. Why do you think they make billions of dollars in profit? Because they have streamlined the process of getting people in to give them money and getting them out the door.
But also, by the way, it's because there's a market for it, right?
It is.
This is the thing that's missed a lot in these conversations. Photographers say, well, this is my art and art is worth something. And if somebody's going to pay for my services, it's the most important thing. It lasts forever. All these conversations about things that are really, frankly, important to them. And it sounds good for them, but it doesn't change the fact that their potential client sitting in front of them literally has $3,000 in their bank account and is hoping that the job that they currently have, they're going to be able to stay at so they can continue to make their salary, upcoming salary to continue to pay bills. That's a tough place to be. And that's a reality. I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money. My parents, when I got married, paid $600 for my wedding photographer. And that was a lot of money for them because they didn't have money. That's reality. So we can wax poetic all day long about the art. The reality is the market's going to do what the market's going to do and leave us behind in some cases if we're not aware of what's going on. But it goes back to data. And, you pointed out it's the cool thing about data, whether it's something like the wedding report or financial data, which these days is so easy to get with something like QuickBooks Online. Yeah, it's no longer complicated. You can work with your accountant and boom, it's done. And you can just jump into a profit and loss report and look at what's going on in your business. So it doesn't take a lot of time. If we just are willing to invest a little bit in it, what we get back from that will be massive. And being structured and organized and business oriented is not mutually exclusive with being an artist. The cool thing is if you put a little bit of time investment into the business side of things, awareness of information, data ultimately that's driving our business, then it frees us up to be the artist. It frees us up and also like to what we were talking about earlier, to spend time with the important people in our life and to build our business.
Well, and as you grow, I think as you find yourself doing more of that, right? The business side of things, marrying it with the creative, building your business, even within the mid range, as you become more popular, people seek you out. Those are the opportunities where you can roll them into a higher end product. Those are the opportunities where you can actually start to begin to charge more. I mean, I worked in the hair industry in the early 90s, actually. Got my license, worked in the hair industry. I loved it. It was great. It was because it was a great creative thing to do. Trained under one of the best hairstylists in the world, Alan Benfield Bush. He worked for Ava Products, trained under Vidal Sassoon. So I got to learn from this guy a couple of times. But one of the things he always said, and this always goes back, he goes, here's how you build your business. So let's say you have no clients, you get clients, you give them free cards, say, hey, give these free cards out to 3 people. Once they bring them back in, I'll give you a free haircut or a free service or whatever. And then as you start to build your business, as soon as you build your business, raise your prices. When you're completely booked, raise your prices, right? So if and then you just keep doing that cycle over and over again, eventually, you'll get to a place where you're making more than the average in the market, obviously. If the market supports it, right? Like there's not very many places in Tucson that are going to spend more than $100 on haircut, right? Maybe color and stuff like that, but you get the idea. As a photographer, a DJ, a planner, I'll just say, look, if once you get maxed out, and that's when you start to go looking at raising your prices a little bit, right? Just, I don't know.
If the market supports it,
if the market supports it,
that would be the big caveat I'd add, because I mean, I'm in Chattanooga and this is where I photographed, and I started at $350 for my first wedding and got to a place where we were charging literally $10,000 for a wedding package in a tiny little conservative market in Tennessee. So the opportunity is there. There was opportunity or the market was there rather. There was opportunity to actually book clients at that price point. But again, I would encourage any photographers listening in, business owners for that matter, and really any industry, look at the market and see what can actually support or what prices can be supported by that marketplace. Because there's opportunity to increase prices, as I did and many other photographers do. But as I said earlier, they're also leaving behind that segment of the market that I've seen in your reports, which is a wide open opportunity.
Yeah,
it's a different business model to support that. I understand that an $800 or $1,200 wedding, to try to do that and make a decent living, you're going to have to do 200, 300, 400 of them a year. The logistics of managing a team. And I mean, there's so much that goes into it, but it's a massive opportunity all throughout the country to do something like that. If photographers would see the opportunity and leverage it with some organization, some structure, somebody that maybe manage logistics for them, but there's opportunity there. They have to be aware of that and understand where the opportunity is.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up a good point. If charging $800, $1,200 for a wedding, well, if you think about the logistics of that, like, okay, let's say I'm only working 4 hours, right? I'm going to go shoot 4 hours.
Exactly.
I charge $1,200. I'm going to go shoot 4 hours. I'm going to edit out the photos to you guys, right? I'm going to spend $200 in photo editing.
Not even that. If you're shooting 4 hours, you might give the client 200 or 300 images.
There you go. So I'm spending $100 on photos. Yeah.
$50 if is more what we're talking about. Yeah.
Plus expenses to get there, all that stuff, right? I made over $250 an hour take home after that, right? Is that a reasonable hourly fee? I don't know. I think that's a pretty reasonable hourly fee.
It's pretty good to me. Yeah, and it might come down when you look at the time and the expenses. But even if you were making $150 an hour, let's just say, and
no one's making $150 an hour, dude, unless you're
nobody
a lawyer.
Is right. And of course, with that model, you might have to shoot 2 or 3 of those a weekend. Yeah. But you're shooting 2 or 3 of those a weekend and spending the same amount of time that one photographer would shoot one wedding. That's right. And yet you're not crammed into the segment of the market that's super crowded because everybody's trying to get into it. So
that's right. That's exactly.
There's opportunity. Look for opportunities in the market where potential clients are not being served, and go there. There's still those opportunities for sure.
Yeah, true. So what would you say, like, for you guys have been outside of COVID as a business owner, what's been the biggest challenge for you? Like over the years, like, is it educating photographers on the value of this? What would have been has that been the biggest challenge?
Biggest. And we've taken different approaches. We've talked about the significance of workflow. We've talked about the financial cost of continuing to manage your own editing. What we landed on was a more kind of emotionally stimulating message, which was to focus on the relationships, right? I've had multiple photographers say to me that I literally gave them their wife back. Some photographers say they'll say you gave me my life back, and that's great too. That's huge.
Yeah.
But a couple in particular said you gave me my wife back because we were able to take over that time-consuming element of editing. But there are so many photographers out there still that haven't bought into the significance, the value of that. And of course, we all come from a different place, so our value set is different. So trying to figure out the language that resonates with as much of the photography industry as possible, that's probably the biggest challenge for us. That's one. The other probably is managing the communication process and understanding a photographer's preferences. Again, as I alluded to earlier, most photographers are sole proprietors. They don't know what it means to manage somebody else, because essentially we're their employee in the end. So what does it mean to manage an employee and communicate to them what it is that you want and train them on an ongoing basis? That's a new process for them. So learning to manage that conversation has been the other biggest challenge for us, because that ultimately translates to consistent results, right? If a photographer is willing to take the time to communicate what exactly it is that they want to us, and then we're able to provide a finished product to them that is a reflection of what they've asked for us, and we can do that consistently, everybody's happy. But when that communication process in there breaks down, that's where it can be challenging. And so we are continually, for years, literally, we've been continuing to refine that collection of editing preferences so that it makes it easier for the photographer to give us that information, to give us feedback after the fact. But yeah, that's one of the biggest challenges for us.
Someone used to always tell me this, and it was basically that if you don't learn how to delegate, you will never move up. And that's so true, and it's scary, I know, because I've been there. Holding on to the thing that I know how to do, only because I feel like no one can ever do it like the way I do it. Only to find out that when I let go and taught someone how to do it, I was like, it was a huge relief off my shoulders, and now I can focus on some other stuff. I don't know that, and I've moved beyond that now. Like, so,
It is, we have to set, and I can say this from personal experience, because even now as a company owner and working with a team, I'm continuing to learn about the significance not only of delegation to my team, but also how to best communicate with them what it is, or best communicate with them in order to get the best possible results. And so that is a challenging process, but it requires setting ego aside, because the assumptions and the projections that photographers are making are based in ego. Not ego like I think all these photographers are stuck up, but ego in that their perspective is of the utmost importance, and the notion that somebody else might have a different perspective, it's not really something that's actively considered. And if they're willing to open their mind and consider that, then there's opportunity for them to save just immense amount of time and ultimately for their business to grow. They just have to be willing to do that. But again, I say this from personal experience because I've had a hard time with it too. Like, I have to set aside my ego and this notion that, only the way that I do it is the best way, or this is the way it should be done. Once I'm able to do that, it is such a relief, because now I'm not trying to juggle so many things. It frees me up massively. It just makes my life as a business owner so much better.
Yeah, that's true. So we talked about, earlier you mentioned the 3 to 5 years ago, but is there something else? If you had to go back 3 or 5 years ago, what did you tell yourself?
That's it, honestly. And this is the thing that I say all the time on my podcast too. The first thing that I would say to a photographer, if they're like, hey, what should I focus on as a new photographer? What's the thing that you feel like is the most important that I really need to make sure I get right? It's the financial piece. So we could call it data, we could call it finances. Really, it's kind of one and the same, but be aware of the numbers. For me, initially as a photographer, it was the actual financial management, because we actually made really good money. Had I managed it better, I would have been in a much better place much sooner. But I didn't have a lot of context, and I got lazy, and ultimately I got scared, and it just became this nightmare of a situation. So make sure that right now, for any photographers, business owners that are listening in, if you haven't set up a QuickBooks Online account and be connected with a great accountant who's going to handhold you, get your back, like walk you through this whole process, do that, because it will make all the difference in the world. It'll bring massive relief, relieve stress. They can help you with the taxes, all that kind of stuff. But then on top of that, it'll put you in a much better place to make intelligent decisions as a business owner that will enable you to continue to grow.
Yeah.
That's huge. Then the second piece of that, the finance piece, but then the data-driven piece as well, looking at the data, whether it's analytics for your website, looking at sources of business, whether it's referrals or the website or otherwise, looking at where you're spending the most money expense-wise. If you have a P&L because you're using QuickBooks now, the profit and loss statement, you can see where all those expenses are going and what you might be able to cut so you can make more money.
Yep.
You can see where you're making the most money and maybe focus more of your effort and energy in that area. But look at the numbers. When I started playing with numbers and actually gaining information from it, it became so much fun. And I felt very... to borrow a very kind of 2020 word, I felt very empowered as a business owner because I had information that I could act on instead of just kind of blindly wondering and guessing and hoping that I was making the right decision.
Yeah. And then taking that data and kind of subbing it down into, specific types of events, right? If you offer different packages or whatever it is, like looking at those individually to see how much each one of those are costing you, how much profit you're earning from each one of those, and find the one that's doing the best for you as a business, right? And go, that's what I need to focus on. Absolutely. If the market supports it, if you're able to get more out of it. Sometimes you're not. Sometimes there's this threshold where that's what you're going to get. And if you try to put too much more into it, then obviously, it becomes this balancing act. But what's your most inspirational wedding or business story you got for me?
It's hard to pick one. I have had endless interactions with clients, both on the photography side and the editing side over the years. And of course, now the podcast side. It's the general idea that the experience of getting feedback from, and it's really been the podcast more as of late. It's been the editing company in years past. But as I continue to build this podcast as well, to get feedback from photographers that say, you're making a difference in my life, you're making a difference in my business. That's just really fulfilling. And I know that, the notion of adding value is going to look different for everybody based on their personal life and their business model. But I can't stress enough the fulfillment that will come from even putting an extra, 6, 7, 8, 10% effort into adding a little bit more value to whatever the service that you offer, adding a little bit more value to the conversation that you get in with the next person that you meet, whether it's somebody you know or you don't know. Always look for opportunities to add value, and the feedback that you get from that is just going to be so fulfilling. It's really, really wonderful. Yeah.
Nathan, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Man, it's great it's great to connect with you like in conversation. I've been such a huge fan of the Wedding Report for so long. Thanks, so it's cool to actually get a chance to chat now.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. See you.